Hey, what's up? This is Jake. You're in Jake's shop. I've got my buddy's 1969 Camaro over here. It's been here for a couple weeks. I went ahead and did a video earlier on a couple weeks back about doing an Art Morrison style 6-point roll cage. Now this car, if you don't remember it, in a few videos back, this has probably been 6 months or so ago, I went ahead and welded all new quarters and all new rear wheelhouses in this car, and it's been painted since then. The rest of the bodywork's been done by others. I've got it back now, did the cage. Next step in the cage is actually going to be, it's not a cage, it's technically a roll bar, but I'm going to do a swing out. And what a swing out is, where the door bar crosses you on the side, you can actually put a kit in there where the bar will swing out, so you can get in and out of the car. In the previous video, I kind of noted there, it's going to be very difficult to get in and out of this car without a swing out. I've convinced him to go ahead and do the swing out sooner than he wanted to do, and a lot of that was just because it'd be so uncomfortable to try and get out of the car otherwise. This car is going to be driven down the street, and having that bar in your way when you're going in and out of the grocery store or what have you at the local shows, it'd be kind of a nuisance. So this bar will actually be able to be fully removed or just be used as a swing out. Okay, we've got an Art Morrison swing out kit here. Here's what comes in your kit. Now, there's actually going to be two because I'm going to do the passenger side as well. But what we've got is, this is your standard illustration for a door bar, similar to what we've got in the Camaro behind me. The lower component of the bar actually needs to be cut back about 3/8 of an inch, and you're going to put this bracket in place by welding it, right? And this lower bracket, per NHRA guidelines, it has to be a bolt. You actually have to have a bolt. You can't just pin it. And that's, I don't know why that is the way that it is, but it is. The upper part of the bar, obviously it doesn't need as much of a gap, an 1/8 inch gap, once that's welded in, and it's just going to be a pin, and it's giving you good information about how far back where the pin needs to go and where you're going to have to drill a hole in your door bar. And this is the bracket that they give you in the kit. There's a lot of different kits out there. This one's a pretty nice kit. I've seen a lot of different types online. Some can be quite costly. This one's pretty cost effective. And then here is your upper door pin, right? That'll be your pin, and you can just pop this in and out after we get that installed. So over here, we've got our door bar. And like I had stated in the previous video, it's going to be very difficult to get in and out of this car without it. I actually haven't even finished fully welding the cage, because now that we're doing swing outs, once this is out of my way, I'm going to really be able to finish this weld a lot easier, which is kind of nice. I could do it, but since we're putting in the kit, why not? Okay, so what I'm going to attempt to do here is actually cut the door bar out of the way. I had shown it earlier. I actually have this really well tacked in, actually partially welded in. What that's going to allow me to do is it's not going to move around much when I go to cut this section out. I actually, in the directions there, it kind of gives you some ideas on maybe some good placements for these brackets. They're talking about 4 inches up off the rocker. So I've kind of used the brackets as a guide and kind of made some marks about, hopefully you're going to be able to see that in the camera, about where I like it down in here. I'll after I get these cut and welded and tacked, I'll kind of show what I'm going to end up doing. But the bracket itself, in the directions you'll see too, where it actually needs to be placed. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on camera or not, but that one's actually elongated a little bit in one direction. That's so when the bar turns out, it's going to have the clearance in the bracket it needs to be able to swing out. The other thing, where you end up making a mark on the inside of the door jamb, you want the bracket pivot point to be up high enough that when the bar swings out, it's going to clear the door enough to where you can sneak in past it. If you're going to leave these in and you're at the race and you want to get in and out a little bit easier. Upper bracket, kind of the same thing. My goal is to bring it back as far as possible to where I can get to a nice good weld on there, but also keep it out of the way for when you're getting in and out of the car when you don't have the bars in. This particular location is about as far back as I can put it, which is my goal, to be able to get a good weld on it and easy access to it. And the good news is the width of the seat right there will pretty much block you. Still need to be a little bit careful getting in and out of the car. You'll see it there. So we'll go ahead and make some cuts. You could cut this stuff with just about anything. Cut off wheels, grinders. I'm going probably a Sawzall with a metal blade. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm fortunate enough to be able to have my Portaband. I've already went ahead and made the marks where I want to cut them. We'll go ahead and do a few cuts here and go on to the next thing. The Portaband's super useful. I'll go ahead and show a little bit about how I'm gonna cut it here, but I have a cordless one. You can get corded ones online. They're actually pretty cost effective. And you want about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch gap. On that end, you're gonna want a 1/4 inch gap. This end only requires an 1/8 inch gap. That cut down there, I'm actually gonna make a mess and a bunch of sparks because I'm gonna use a cutoff wheel just because the portaband's gonna be a little hard to get down in there. So, on to the next step. Okay, went ahead and got that cut out with my angle grinder. Now, what we've got here is the lower bracket, and I've got it kind of temporarily positioned where I want it. I want to do the lower bracket first, and mainly because that kind of sets the tone for everything, right? That's going to set the tone for how this thing swings out once it's in this bracket. You know, again, I've cut it in the area that I wanted to cut it because I want it to clear the door when it's at its complete angle. Now, what's going to happen, though, is this is at this angle right now. I can already see that when it swings out, it's going to swing low and down, which is a little bit unnecessary. I'd rather have that pivot point turned up a little bit. So that's kind of why I want to pre-position it a little bit onto this tube. Now, it's really complicated to try and get this thing positioned where I want it to kind of get an idea how I want to swing it out. You can see it's already fallen off there. So I'm going to play with it a little bit, but what I'm ultimately believe I'm going to do here, this is what we're dealing with. You can kind of see it. This is the bracket that came in the kit. Here's the tube. It's loose, right? So I'm going to shim it on each side with a blade or something. I was using Sawzall blades, seem to be about the right thickness. And that way I'm not dealing with this situation here when I'm trying to get a good idea where this thing exactly it needs to go. So I'll get that position, because what's going to happen is I might end up turning it up a little bit. That way it swings out a little more evenly. And that'll end up setting the tone for exactly where this needs to be, since I haven't done either side, depending on the angle. There's a lot of things that probably math could figure out, but that sounds more complicated than just doing it this way to me. Okay, so using my blade shim clamp technique here, it's official, right? Kind of got this at the angle I want. Now you can see how much of an angle that pivot point's at. And what I did is just kind of clamped it in place. Now obviously I'm able to swing the clamp around a little bit before it falls off of there. And then make sure that door bar kind of comes out perpendicular a little bit more to the door, so it's not swinging down low and looking ridiculous. It'd work, it just wouldn't look as nice or be as functional. You know, the directions don't say anything about the exact location of this bracket. They do say that you put a 3/4 inch gap between this tube and the door tube. But what you've got here is a bracket that's about 3 inches long total. The directions allude to it being about halfway from this cut point on this lower assembly. Then you have a 3 inch gap and you have the remainder of the tube here. So the bracket distance is kind of key in a way, because if you have it too far out and you have your hole too far back, you're going to have way too much bar trying to swing back in and hit that cup. Even though you can see these brackets are oblonged on one side. And you can kind of see here. I'll have it about right there, but if I swing the clamp out of the way, you're going to see that it comes out at an angle. See, and that gives you your clearance. It's all about giving you the clearance to that bar. All right, I've got some fitment done here, and I'm going to kind of explain what I did here. So obviously I talked before about how this lower bracket on this door bar is actually tilted to the side. And what that's allowing me to do here is I'll try and represent it. When the bar swings out, now it's about perpendicular with the door handle. Whereas if I didn't twist that bracket up, you know, up slightly at an angle, it would have been down low. So that just kind of makes it a little bit easier. It's always going to receive into this side the same way, because it's no matter what happens. So, but because of the angle I'm at, as it comes in and receives, it's going to come into it. So the same thing with the upper bracket. I kind of put it in a position and I test fit it a few times until I really liked what I was seeing. And you can see that that receiver side as well is tilted sideways. Let me try to do that a little better. Sideways. So that's really just kind of a, you know, couple little things when you're fitting these in. Everything's custom, right? Everything's getting tweaked and fit to your liking. You know, you can throw these brackets on no problem, but if you don't actually test fit some things and kind of look at how this is going to react, this is what you're doing. So now that I've got, so basically all that side did, I kind of held it with my hand. I put a shim in it. I got it lined up with and I actually cheated a little bit. I went ahead and used my MIG. You can weld this stuff with 70S, ER70S2, I don't know. Anyways, it's pretty much standard welding wire, but you don't want to do, you kind of want to anneal it first is what they say. I use that as a cheater just to tack it, then come back in with my TIG and actually TIG it. But now that I've got it lined up, you know, once I get this in the perfect position where I want it, I will go ahead and drill, mark the holes and drill them for that upper pin. All right, kind of wrapping up that door bar install. One thing I wanted to show, just little detail stuff, always makes things a little nicer and better and safer. This is one end of the swing out here, and what we've got are just a little bit of metal. This chromoly actually tends to cut off pretty sharply, at least when I was cutting it with the couple different ways I was cutting with the portaband there and the angle grinder. So on the inside of the tube, what I like to do is use a round file. I've got a few different ones around the shop, and just kind of clean up that inner edge. And what this allows, it just keeps the junk out of the way. So I like to do that too. And the other thing is, I want to round and ease the edges of this tube. And I'm going to do this for both bars and both ends of it. But I've been using a flapper. It's a little bit smoother and a little more controlled because I'm not really trying to grind it down too much. I'm just really trying to smooth that edge down so it's not so sharp. It's a little more user friendly when you're taking it in and out of the car. You don't need to put much pressure on. Cool. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. Same with where I drill. Just kind of smooth them out. That's why I like these little flapper discs so much. You just kind of lay it up. Basically sand metal. All right, a couple other things I want to show you wrapping up this video. We'll come around here. All right, so we have a couple little tricks actually, what I'm doing to just kind of finalize everything here. I'm using a TransStar sealer, and what the sealer is going to be used for is where the plates meet the floor. The light's not going to be great in here, but basically where the plates meet the floor, I don't think you have to actually fully weld the plates to the floor, but I did. I'm going to go ahead and seal down along this edge here where it meets the floor. Just, you know, welds are porous in some level, and there's always a potential for moisture to be on the floors of the cars. I'll probably even seal a little bit around where I welded here, and I'm not trying to goop it in there, just a light coating. You know, it's kind of an extra layer on top of paint just to hide my crappy welds. No, I mean, maybe. But moreover, really just to seal it. You know, there's a lot of moisture down on the floor, potentially, especially in a driver. So again, I'm going to seal all along those edges, just real lightly. Use my finger, clean that up, kind of finish it off. This door bar turned out really nice. I'm really happy with it. Basically the same exact thing from the other side. Mirrors is going to come across, will be perpendicular to the door handle. I mean parallel. And clear it. So those were kind of fun to install. Never really done that style before, but they turned out really nice. Now the other big trick, and one of the hardest parts of this, was up there. So where those tubes meet the top of the hoop, getting down around the bottom of the tube and the sides is no problem, but there's about I want to say an inch area where it's really tight, even with my TIG tip and everything else. It's just really, really hard. I do have the correct amount of clearance, and actually that slight slope in the main hoop that I kind of went over on the first video to get the head clearance and the clearances I wanted helps. But there's still a headliner in this car. It's a lot easier to install a headliner without a roll bar in there. So I've got a welding blanket basically just pinched up there. And what that's going to hopefully allow is to keep, or what did allow I should say, is to keep any splatter from getting onto that headliner. It still gets hot, and I still have to be very careful and go real slow, but luckily those are just two very small areas of weld where I had to be extra cautious on, and it allowed me to get up in there. Every car is going to be different, but this one, that's what really worked out for me, and I'm really happy with how this roll bar turned out. I think my friend's going to be really happy as well, because it's one of the better ones I've ever seen, or even probably one of the best ones I've done actually. So anyways, and if you like this video at all, hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.